Greek man. Now, from the tomb of Pharaoh Ramses III, 1,200 years before the Common Era, the ancient Egyptian identified himself as number one, the black man. This is the other black man. So ancient Egyptians were blacks. That brings us to the question of what went wrong. That today we have those who are in the last, the Semites, being the occupants of the land of Egypt. The Christian Bible tells us that God got angry with the Pharaoh. Because God was angry with the Pharaoh, God asked Moses and Aaron to go and demand the independence of the Israelites or the Jews from the Pharaoh. And the Pharaoh was supposed to have refused first, and God sent some pestilence to harass them until the Pharaoh agreed and allowed the Hebrews or the Jews to move. You know of the famous song, "Let My People Go."
Yes.
And they were supposed to have crossed the Red Sea into Canaan. Meanwhile, Canaan itself was part of Egypt, ruled by the Pharaoh. So when you leave, you say, for instance, you are in Accra. You say you don't like the presidency of John Mahama. Then you move from Accra and you go and settle in Nsawam. What have you achieved? Nothing. So when we take all these ones into consideration, that the population of Egypt today is not what we saw in the picture, the question arises, where did the black people go? The black people have built, let's come to this one, we have been celebrating some joke in the aeronautics or the aviation industry, crediting first the Icarus brothers for being the first people to have attached feathers to their arms and jumped from a hilltop to launch the world into the aviation age about 100 years ago. Then came the Wright brothers of the US. They also claimed the same thing for the same number of years. And on top of them came Leonardo da Vinci, who was supposed to have flown the first flying engine 200 years earlier. But I can show you a picture of what the ancient Egyptians made, the glider, 2,000 years earlier. So who brought about aviation? It was the black man. The blacks, when they go into the aviation industry, whatever be the examination conducted, the blacks will always be on top, because that is something they have. Now in my language, the Ebe language, we call the aircraft Yamavu, the air car. Who then coined that phrase? It was from ancient Egypt. See that when our people were, what led them to leave ancient Egypt was the invasion. Invasion by the Hyksos, the Assyrians, the Turks, and what have you. It were ending up with the British. But Julius Caesar was there. And Julius Caesar married Cleopatra. And Cleopatra, like I said the other time, gave birth to a boy who became Caesarus, who was named Caesarus. But when Cleopatra went back to follow the husband, Julius Caesar, to Rome, she took the scribes along, and they carried over 200,000 papyrus scrolls containing all the knowledge system of ancient Egypt. So the Romans, if you go to the Vatican today, in the vault of the Vatican, you will have these papyrus scrolls. And what led to the Nicaea conference was an attempt to doctor what had been written by the wise men of the Nile Valley. So you have the papyrus bearing such names as the Turin papyrus, the Ebers papyrus, the Hess papyrus. All these ones are bearing foreign names. But papyrus, I wanted to get one and bring. But once the time changed, so I couldn't bring papyrus. It grows in Ghana. It never grows in Europe.
I see.
So how do we have Turin papyrus? We have Turin papyrus because they stole all the things. In fact, I'll have to help your guest with reading how they got the names. The oldest papyrus is the papyrus Kahun. Now, the papyrus Smith is the brother to the papyrus Ebers. Ebers is a German name. But let's see what they talk. Papyrus Ebers is used as our founding book for the knowledge of ancient Egyptian medicine. On its reverse side, there is a little calendar with the days of Sotis, that's Cyrus with his heliacal rising, about at the beginning of the cresting of the Nile, when the Egyptian year began, from the 9th year of King Amenophis I. The Egyptologist George Ebers was a university professor in Leipzig. In 1873, an Arab in Luxor offered to sell him the papyrus. An Arab in Luxor. I went to the Egyptian embassy here in Accra with a photocopy of some hieroglyphic text. And I wanted to find out if they can transcribe it for me. They said, no, they don't. That immediately tells you that they don't know anything about the hieroglyphs. They cannot transcribe it. So if they don't, who then wrote the hieroglyphs? It was the ancient Egyptians. They wrote the hieroglyphs. And here they tell you that the Arab man found the papyrus. The papyrus Hest was unearthed in the Dar el-Balas, Upper Egypt, by an Arab again. So this tells you the time of the invasion or occupation of ancient Egypt by the Arabs. And they were just taking everything. And the papyrus, you will see that interestingly, like I said the other time, when you are born to the royal family, your history from the time of birth to the time of death is recorded by a scribe assigned to you. Wow. So when you are dead, your papyrus is rolled and put in your tomb or sarcophagus as they called it. So these people, having taken over, their business was to look for all the treasures in the tombs, like we have the treasure hunt and people going into our cemeteries to unearth bodies and sell. So they went and took all these ones. And they were selling to these Europeans. And that's how we come by a papyrus bearing the name of Turin. You go to the British Museum today, they have a lot of documents they have taken from Egypt. And the people themselves who were there were driven away, and they moved for thousands of miles in search of a newfound land. And the newfound land has become the land we call Ghana today. Our ancestors passed through Timbuktu and what have you.
I mean, I've heard it, but is there evidence to say that indeed we are the old Egyptians that came this? Is there any evidence?
Sheikh Anta Diop, the Senegalese anthropologist, had recorded in his book, after extensive research, he came to the conclusion that the Pharaoh and his descendants occupy from the Mono River to the west, to the Volta River to the east. You will see that the Akan-speaking people came in along the Guan stretch. You see the Guan-speaking people cut this land we call Ghana into two. From the Ketekrachi end to the Nzima end, you have the Guan-speaking people.
We are coming straight back after that. We want to find out which part of Egypt you came from. I must have been a pharaoh back then, you know. Who knows? Stay tuned. Well, thank you very much for staying. Education, education, education. You know, knowledge is power. And I told you in the beginning that until the lions have their own historians, you know, the stories of hunting always glorify the hunter. So here we are, arriving from Egypt with empirical evidence. Any artifacts have been found that were left on the routes or? something to tell my viewers that, look, indeed, we have migrated.
You see this one. This is the deliveries tool. Unfortunately, we have been tuned up that when women are going to deliver now, they are made to lie prostrate and they will be told, push, push, push. In fact, in the northern part of Ghana, one woman had developed the delivery stool. So when you're going to deliver, you sit on the stool, and it's very easy. The French people, what do? When you go to the French, they have this squat lavatory. They tell you when you go and you squat, you ease yourself freely, easily, and quickly, and you are gone. But our brothers from the Western Europe, including the Americas, what do? They put a seat down, and they tell you you are entering a rest room. So they go and sit down on the WC port, resting and reading. But the Frenchman does not want you to waste any time. So you go, you squat. In fact, when you cross into Togo, they have a lot of these squat lavatories. But when you come to Ghana, we have a lot of these sitting WC ports. So maybe that explains why we look a little bit hazy in our activities. But what went wrong with us? In fact, we are sitting in the center of the universe. What is it which has gone wrong? What has gone wrong is that we have refused to open our eyes to see.
Are there anything that we do here now that we can trace back to, the ancient Egyptians also did the same thing, and therefore it was the same people who traveled down south?
Herodotus had recorded that one, the ancient Egyptians were black. Mm-hmm. They had kinky hair. That is very common with all blacks, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah.
They possessed the powers of divination to interpret the will of God. Mm-hmm. Afa. The Yorubas call it Ifa. The divination system. So that was what the ancient Egyptians were doing. They will divine and find out who are you. And they will tell you. In that one, we were doing here, and we still do. Only that some of us have become so Christianized that we have lost our direction. So you go to a court of law or a court of competent jurisdiction, and you go and you hold the Bible or the Holy Quran and say, I swear by the Holy Quran or the Holy Bible to tell the truth, and you lie. But if you look at this picture of the judgment chamber in ancient Egypt, the deities are in command. So how can you go and lie? You can't lie. The justices are sitting up there, 12 of them. They are on top. Mm-hmm. And your heart is put in a scale and weighed against a feather. But if we will do the same thing today here, we will just have to take, what do you call it, the bodia, the lashi from the priest or something, and swear by it. Or I swear by Antwanyama that the evidence I'm going to give is the truth and nothing else but the truth. If you lie, like Ananias in the Bible, what happens to you? You have to fall dead. And that's where they said the wages of sin is death. Lying is a sin, so you don't lie. Mm-hmm. But today we go to our courts, and when you want to talk about this, they say, no. But when you go to our shrines, they have a pot of cool palm oil. If the thing is missing, and some group of people are rounded up, you just put your hand into the cold pot or container of palm oil. If you are not the one who stole the thing, you put it and you think it's ice water. But if you are the one who did the stealing, immediately your finger touches it, you have to throw yourself away, because it will be too hot for you. If we go back to our roots and we re-establish that one, we will not have most of the problems we are having now.
Also, but the thing is that I don't know if we were made to believe that, those things are for certain. They are not of God. You see, so that's and good and evil cannot live side by side. Therefore, those things, have to go. And that's the challenge we face.
I want to read you what King Leopold said about our system. Where have I missed that?
Because
King Leopold, when he was sending the missionaries to the Congo. But first, let me just remind your cherished viewers about something which appeared in the Jerusalem Post of 27th September 1985. Headed, Ashkenazim once sought help of Ethiopian Jews. When the first Ashkenazi Jews came to the land of Israel early in the last century, they appealed to the Jews of Ethiopia for spiritual guidance, asking them to send 3 of their rabbis to Jerusalem to ordain the rabbis of the land of Israel. This was taken from the Beit Hatfutot Museum of the Jewish Diaspora. So, they acknowledge that we, the ancient Ethiopians, were just consulted quite recently. I want to see Sheikh Anta Diop's thing and read it out to you. So I was holding it some few minutes reading. Yeah. Then I will treat your viewers to what Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe. You remember that name? You remember Nnamdi Azikiwe?
No, I don't remember the name.
Oh.
What did he do?
Nnamdi Azikiwe was the first president of the Republic of Nigeria.
Ah, I see.
He and Wallace Johnson were tried by the British. Now, King Leopold II of Belgium had this to tell his missionaries: Reverend fathers and dear compatriots, the task asked of you to accomplish is very delicate and demands much tact and diplomacy. Fathers, you are going to preach the gospel, but your preaching must be inspired by, first, the interest of the Belgian government. The main goal of your mission in the Congo is not to teach the Africans the knowledge of God, because they already know Him. They talk and commit themselves to their God. They know that killing and stealing, adultery and blasphemy are not good. Interestingly, Belgium is the headquarters of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. And just quite last week or something, the U.S. Secretary of State hosted a meeting of so-called sister coalition forces, or whatever they call them, to fight the Islamic State forces. And he said because they have been bombing them, their capability is now reduced. So, now he continues, let us have the courage to admit this fact. So, you do not teach them the things they already know. Your role essentially will be to facilitate the task of the administrative and industrial personnel. That is to say, you will interpret the gospel in a manner that protects and serves the interests of Belgium in that part of the world. The problems in the Congo up till today. In doing so, you will see that the savages will not be interested in the wealth that their soil possesses, in order that they do not want them. Like our Obuasi. Obuasi is there, it's supposed to be Ghanaian property but owned by foreigners. Thus, they will not be involved in murderous competition with us and dream of living luxurious lives. Your knowledge of the scriptures will help us to use special texts that commend the infidels to love poverty, such as the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor, for theirs is the kingdom. This will cause the African to fear being rich in order that he may go to heaven. From time to time, keep them from rebelling and keep them in fear that you will use violence. You will teach them to endure anything, even when they are insulted or beaten by your compatriots. You will teach them that whosoever uses violence is not a child of God, but he is a child of God. You will cause them to follow the example of the saints who turn the other cheek. You will take them away from anything or act that provides them with the courage to confront us. What are they taking away? I am alluding to their magic, that is juju, voodoo. If you take them away from those ones, they will not confront us. They will become as meek as a sheep, and then you can brutalize them. Your actions will be essentially on the younger people that they might not rebel. If the commandments of the father are conducive to the parents, the child should learn to obey what the missionary teaches him, because he is the father of his soul. We must force them into submission and obedience. This is King Leopold sending missionaries who were supposed to come and teach us the knowledge of God they admit we already know. Dear compatriots, these are some of the principles you must apply. You will find many more in the book that will be given to you at the end of this session. Teach the gospel to the African in an African style, in order that they are kept submissive to the white colonies. They should not rebel against the injustices done to them by the colonies. Make them always meditate on, blessed be those who weep, cry, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Always convert blacks by means of the whip. Keep their wives in submission for 9 months, so that they graciously work for you. Require from them offerings of recognition, goats, chicken, eggs, each time you visit their villages. Cause them to sing each and every day that it is impossible for a rich man to enter into heaven. Make them pay tithes each Sunday at church. Utilize this money that is intended for the poor for our business investments. Institute a system of confession which will make you good detectives in order to denounce, put down every black which has a spirit of rebellion against the system. Teach the Africans that their statues, idols, are the works of the devil. Teach the Africans to forget about their heroes in order to worship and give praise to ours. Don't give a seat to an African when they come to see you. At the most, give him a cigarette. Don't invite him to dine with you, even if he gave you a chicken every time you went to see him. Consider all blacks as little chicken and require from them to refer to you as father. My dear compatriots, if you apply all these to the letter, the interests of Belgium in the Congo will be protected for many centuries. This is King Leopold sending missionaries who came to our land claiming they were civilizing or Christianizing us. What do you make out of this? And we are still continuing this. We have people who are supposed to be men of God who will take the tithe from us and buy all the latest in the city and live in mansions and tell us that our treasures are stored in heaven. When we go there, we will enjoy. But they don't enjoy theirs in heaven. They enjoy theirs here.